Please welcome back Semafor Editor-at-Large, Steve Clemens, for a conversation on artificial intelligence.
Josh Gottbaum is leaving right now. He's going over to, he's going to hang out and watch our thing with Brad Smith. But I want to say Josh Gottbaum's a great American. But he's going over to Brookings. I'm like, what does Brookings have that we don't have here right now? Yeah, at lunch. But that's on the way. And before I bring Brad up, I just want to do a shout out, our friend Christine Sheehan and Jim Clifton. Thank you so much. They run Gallup Hall. We're so honored to be here. We want to thank you for our partnership. Thank you both here. And they're cool people in the audience. Radovan Javorcik, the ambassador of Slovakia. Ben Smith, our editor-in-chief. And we had a lot of cool people here, and we appreciate you spending your time. I'm going to be counting and taking notes as to who's here at 5 o'clock. Okay, so let me bring to the stage my good friend Brad Smith, who's vice chair and president of Microsoft. Round of applause for Brad. So let me start out. Brad, I've known you a long time. I remember you were like general counsel and used to do IP and trade, which is kind of part of the discussion. What do you like now? Navigating Activision and ethical AI, or do you miss the old trade days?
The old trade days are still part of what I deal with from time to time. I just think it's fascinating, for better and for worse. Every societal issue has become in part a technology issue. Every technology issue is in substantial part a societal issue. So, the world is changing because of technology, and it's just an extraordinary time.
Did you check into ChatGPT this morning and then ask it to anticipate what questions I would ask?
I did not, but I perhaps should have, or at least Bing, which is
Bing, right.
Our application.
Bing was wonderful to me the other day, as I said, went in and gave me credit for lots of things I didn't do, but I'll take it, But let me just start out. You wrote a book, you co-authored a book, Tools and Weapons. And in this book, which I've read in both of its editions, you go into great detail on why essentially the libertarian ethic of technology development companies could become dangerous, that the application, the development of technology, and I want to specifically talk about AI, but there's also quantum, there are a lot of other technologies that are emerging, facial recognition, et cetera, can be used to undermine society rather than to advance it. Do you have that fear about AI?
Well, in fact, we had 3 chapters in our book, which we updated a couple of years ago, about AI. Every technology is used both for good and bad, because unfortunately human nature is both good and bad. And the fundamental thesis of our book, which I believe is absolutely valid for where we are today with AI, is twofold. The first is the people who create this technology need to step up and exercise responsibility and even some self-restraint. And we need to ensure that just as we live in a country where no person, no government, no company is above the law, no technology should be above the law either, which basically means we're going to need law, we're going to need regulation for artificial intelligence.
Is it unusual for a major technology company to be inviting regulators in?
I think it was when we first started espousing that point of view. I think that the alternative view, don't worry, be happy, we've got this and we're great, that has sort of lost credibility everywhere in the world. So, as that view has lost credibility, people have strived for, a new equilibrium, if you will. Right now, I will say, as somebody who spends a lot of time in a lot of different places in the world, the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States are very different. And on the East Coast, people are looking at the West Coast and saying, "Oh my gosh, didn't you guys do enough damage with social media? Now you're really going to destroy us? We're not going to trust you." And on the West Coast, they're saying, "Oh my gosh, all these people in Washington are going to create regulation. We better have a meeting to tell them what to do." As if the West Coast coming together is going to cause everybody on the East Coast to say, "Thank you for showing us the way." We've got to bridge this divide. I personally think that the best thing that those of us who create the technology can do is share more information about how it works so that we all have a shared understanding of what we're dealing with, and then we'll all build ideas on top.
How would you grade the literacy level of Congress on these issues?
I participated in a briefing last week on the West Coast for 10 members of the House China Select Committee. And I basically started by saying something I really believe. It was like, look, everybody criticizes members of Congress for not understanding the technology. What we should do is criticize ourselves in the tech sector for not sharing with Congress how the technology works. How can you criticize somebody for not knowing something you never told them in the first place? That's part of the
Did you
divide.
watch
You
the
have to close.
TikTok hearings?
No, I did not actually, other than little excerpts
Yeah,
on
yeah.
TikTok. But this is part of life. Look,
Yeah.
Steve, let me just say, journalists take cheap shots at government officials for not knowing enough.
I
It's
take
easy.
expensive shots.
Yeah, that's true. Let's all just come on.
Yeah.
Let's build an understanding of what we're dealing with, and let's build on top of it.
Well, look, the big issue right now is that the AI, the coming AI, has come up so much in the conversations that we had last night, this morning, during the forum today, on the broad notion of ethical AI and what the guardrails and elements of that would be. And I'm genuinely interested in how we get that right and how you build an ecosystem that's competitive, that the market power and market footprint of ethical AI takes hold, and that competes against unethical AI in a winning way. So what do we need to get right to get that ecosystem rooted?
Well, I would say three things. Number one, let's start by building on what we have already. Now, the good news is AI did not get invented in 2023, even though I think this is a year that's a real inflection point. Yeah, at Microsoft, we have been building what we call a responsible AI infrastructure for 7 years. And it starts with principles. It builds on our enterprise risk management system for cybersecurity, for privacy, for digital safety. It implements the principles through a corporate standard, requirements for our engineering teams. We have training, testing, tools. We have a governance system with monitoring and auditing and the like. That kind of thing, I think, will be useful for us to learn from each other, develop best practices, and understand the harms we're trying to avoid. Second, let's figure out the right regulatory path, including for the United States. And right now, part of the conversation in Washington is we're not going to make the same mistake we made with social media, watching the problems explode and then solving it too late. And I think that's right, although maybe we should actually fix the issues with social media while we're at it as well, rather than just move to the next thing. And then finally, look, let's recognize the biggest risks, the biggest harms from AI are probably going to come when they're put in the hands of foreign governments that are our adversaries. I mean, look at how the Russians are using cyber influence operations, not just in Ukraine, but in the United States. Look at the advances China and Iran are making in the cyber influence space. We need a national strategy to use AI to defend and disrupt and deter, and most importantly, to start by detecting when AI is being used and strengthen our defenses.
Alibaba announced that it is coming out with its own AI capacity. And I don't have the tools to understand if their AI is better than our AI, is Microsoft's AI better than another player's AI. Do you worry about Alibaba AI and should we have different calipers for understanding, what ethical AI actually looks like?
Yes. I think we need to understand both where everybody is with respect to the advances in AI itself, and then understand their practices when it comes to ethical, or for that matter, unethical AI. At Microsoft over the last few years, we've usually sat down and we try to assess, as you would expect, how are we doing? How are our closest competitors doing? And we usually start by looking at a top tier of three. It's OpenAI and Microsoft, it's DeepMind, which is part of Google, and it's the Beijing Academy of Artificial Intelligence, which is fundamentally funded by the Chinese government. And then there's others. There's Amazon and its partners, there's Meta, there's new entrants in the United States, there's Baidu, there's Alibaba. There will be others. There are some in the UK, some in Israel. But among that top tier of those three, we usually estimate that the distance among us is best measured in months. We're months ahead or we're months behind. Right now, we would say we're months ahead. But that's the kind of race this is. And one of the ways you can try to measure this is something that now everybody's sort of clamping down. They're not sharing as much. It's scale. What is the size of these models? I think one of the things that OpenAI proved that Google should get a lot of credit for some of the advances in 2017, 2018, the so-called transformer technology, the T in GBT. But OpenAI had two advances that it added to it. One is to use humans, people, with reinforcement learning to better train and tune these models. And the second thing, the thing that has really made all the difference, is scale, the size of these models. And basically, until about 2021, 2 years ago, people would report on the size of the models. The number of so-called parameters in them had reached, say, the trillion threshold. And the Beijing Academy of Artificial Intelligence put out in 2021 that they had crossed that threshold. Now you won't see anybody announcing their parameters because everybody's recognized that this is like the missile gap of the Soviet Union and US Cold War days. Who had more missiles? Who has more parameters today? It is a race. It's a race between organizations. It is a race between countries. And just starting to ground ourselves in some of that, I think, will be helpful.
I want to ask a sort of a different question. Microsoft had this fascinating report about the war in Ukraine. And actually, it was that report that taught me that the invasion happened on February 23rd, the attack on February 23rd with the cyber issues. And I guess, my issue is, now we see the leak of these Pentagon documents, which is one of the biggest stories in this town. Like, how did it happen? And the place where it seems to have come out is in some of these gaming platforms, games and whatnot. You want to buy a big game company, Activision. How do you, as you move into this new world of gaming and this big acquisition which you're trying to make, I'd love to hear what the status of that is. Do we have security leaks in places and cultures in the gaming world that worry you?
Well, I'd put gaming in the right context for this. It's not like, playing Call of Duty is going to lead to deaths in the real world. I mean, these are video games. What people are talking about is around games, you have a community of gamers. They come together. They talk to each other, including when they're playing a game. And for the last several months, our digital threat analysis team has been identifying efforts by the Russians to basically penetrate, some of these gaming
communities. So you've been seeing it happen.
Oh yeah, we've been advising governments about this. I mean, it's the Wagner Group, it is Russian intelligence, and they're just in part using this as a place to get information into circulation. That's what happened here. It included the Discord channel around Minecraft. It included others of these. To me,
so you kind of know it was the Russians.
I won't go farther than what I've just gone here, but I would also say, in truth, it's not the number one thing we should worry about. They're going to publish information somewhere. It just happens to be a good place for them to get the information into circulation, and then ultimately journalists find it. What we should be more worried about, in my opinion, is just the sophistication of what is a very broad-based digital threat. If you take cybersecurity threats across the board, there are nation-state malicious attacks, as we've seen in Ukraine. There is ransomware, which is fundamentally malicious, even if it's for financial crime. There are efforts to engage in espionage, and there are efforts to influence democracies, most importantly. And in Moscow, these are not four separate things. It's a continuum of four connected things. And in Washington, we need to look at it the same way. And then we need to use AI as one of the tools to defend against this. But we need a broad-based strategy, which I believe the nation is pursuing. I was surprised yesterday when, frankly, Jen Easterly said she'd never been so pessimistic about where we are with cybersecurity because of AI. I'm actually so much more optimistic in 2023 than I was in 2020 or 2021. Let's not forget, just 27 months ago, this administration was beginning with SolarWinds.
Right.
And because of Jen Easterly, because of CISA, because of this administration, and because of this Congress, this nation has made major advances in better protecting against cybersecurity threats. Look at the war in Ukraine. Look at how cyber attacks from Russia have been massively ineffective.
Right.
And then ask yourself the fundamental lesson. To me, it's this. Technology, if put to work, will do more to strengthen defense than to advance offense. That is the lesson we need to, I think, build on.
One last real quick one. I don't know if you or Satya Nadella hang out with Elon Musk. Do you?
Not socially.
Okay. So Elon and a bunch of other tech leaders have called for a 6-month pause in AI research. Wondering if you think the Chinese or Russians are going to heed their call, and will you or should the U.S. government heed their call to pause AI research and development?
I don't see people pausing the research, but we should ask ourselves, in my view, not what we should stop doing for 6 months. Let's ask ourselves, what would we like to get done in 6 months? Let's use the first 2 months of the 6 months to heed the call that came yesterday from NIST. Let's build a shared understanding of AI. Let's please understand the technology. Let's put together our best ideas, and then let's move forward the pace of policy and law and regulation. A 6-month pause does nothing if everything pauses, including the world of regulation. I'd rather see government move faster, and I think that's the ultimate solution for a lot of this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Vice Chair and President of Microsoft, Brad Smith, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, sir. Thank you.